Hello and welcome to another episode of FinTech Focus TV. Today, a special episode. I'm absolutely delighted to introduce you to PJ from the RegTech conference. PJ, how are you?
Excellent, Toby. Thank you for having me.
Fantastic. Look, listen, I'm excited about this. We met probably about a year or so ago, and you've been talking about this conference to me. It's now in its 10th year. I think RegTech has probably never been more at the forefront of everything that's happening. I can only see that getting more and more detailed as it happens, as it continues to go further forward as well. I'm excited to hear about what you've been talking about. We had a little chat offline. You talked to me about the agenda. You talked to me about some of the pertinent issues. But first and foremost, PJ, just give us a brief introduction about yourself and what you're doing, and the 10th year and the growth of the RegTech event itself as well.
Yeah, happy to do so. So look, I run RegRisk Legal Solutions, which is really helping firms and their suppliers through this enormous RegTech shift that we're going through right now. For us, the conference is, as you say, this is our 9th one we've put together in 10 years, so we've been at this fairly frequently. But the big headline this year is that this is not your same old RegTech. We're entering a much different market, and we see that through talking to the firms, working with the regulators, understanding all these detailed briefs, and then aggregating it all up and saying, well, what's really going on here? And that's the thing that's different about our event than many, is we pull in all kinds of disciplines in this conversation. We work with the fixed trading community, which obviously you spent a long time with them as well. We work with the compliance communities. We work with the trade associations. We try to get a holistic perspective of what's going on in the market. We think we really have a good bead on where things are going this year.
Absolutely. And you, as you say, it's right in the middle of the eye of the storm of RegTech. Tell me when the event is, where it is, who should be going, how they get in touch about it.
It's the 26th of March in London, EC3, so nice and central. We're looking at over 200 delegates. We have 70 institutions on board already, and including 30 banks. They're financial institutions from 10 countries. So it's very much a global gathering in London. And it's deliberately a senior audience. So it's your chief risk officers, with your chief compliance officers, with your legal experts and your data experts, and most importantly, technology, because AI is front and center of the discussion this year. And obviously we want to bring that mix to the stage and help people form views on what this all means to them.
AI very much driving the risk agenda at the moment, right?
Yeah.
Both positively and negatively, I presume.
Yeah, I mean, there's some real upsides and some real downsides. And I think ultimately the downside is that, the regulators have completely caught up and retooled the way they're looking at the firm's use of AI, which also brings into how well they're using their data and the rest of the IT infrastructure. So, data is capital, compute is trust, and sovereignty is a form of control. And these themes are now dominating the way regulators engage with firms, and we're already starting to see some early finds, in all that space. And that's ultimately a big change for the firms. RegTech traditionally has been about, oh, there's a new reg, let me plug in some RegTech. and this AI agenda really just changes all that to say, no, it's about the way you govern the entire operating model. And ultimately, you need to have much more holistic perspective than just one project that put in one change the bank initiative.
And you run with a sort of strapline of intent is no longer enough, which I love, because I get what you're saying there. I think this has been something here where, not to be too patronising, but it feels like it's always been an afterthought, regulatory technology and such like. And whilst there's been some huge strides further forward, and particularly if I think back to the rise of RegTech probably through 2020 and 2021, where it really came to the fore as we saw the pandemic sort of hit. It sort of that was kind of like the petrol on the bonfire for the space. But still, there seems to be an arrogance or an afterthought, or we'll deal with it later a little bit with some of the the regulatory issues that we see in the industry. And like that, intent is no longer enough feels very relevant at the moment with what we're seeing and the implications and the downsides of doing that. So expand on that a little bit for me, PJ.
Yeah, sure. I mean, it definitely fits with that whole digitalization theme that really, got accelerated through COVID, which, as you say, was part of the whole heyday of, hey, we have a bunch of new rules now. We need to really look at how we're bringing those on board. But, ultimately, the supervisors are digitalizing themselves. and they're using AI, and they're then accelerating their decision making. And ultimately, this evidence that they collect really has balance sheet implications. I mean, yes, we have a senior management regime, and yet, yes, there are some detailed op risk controls, but now they actually penalize you with the Pillar 2 capital buffer increase. So it's that extra 100 bips that really gets the board's attention and takes money away from the business. I think the incentives are changing. I wouldn't say they've all changed yet. It's definitely not aligned globally, and there's a lot of diversification. But ultimately, the supervision has plugged in, and they're really looking for digital assurance from the board level on down to a whole bunch of new detailed governance controls.
So yeah, speaking of the subjects of AI, data is obviously always mentioned in the same breath, quite rightly, and it relies on the engine, the fuel in the engine of AI is the quality of the data that comes into it. People are recognizing that. People are recognizing. I think you talk about data as capital. I know that's a big theme in what you're talking about. Give me a bit more of an example of how you're bringing that into the theme of the conference.
Yeah, well, we're getting the regulators there to help describe this themselves. But either side of the channel, they're doing these new supervisory reviews, the SREP process, and ultimately that takes data scoring and IT risk scoring or ICT risk scoring to this new level. And that's what they're using to say, okay, well, we do or don't trust your level of governance of your institution, and that's what will ultimately drive that capital increase. So ultimately, all these things we used to look at as, oh yeah, we just got the report wrong, we'll fix it later, now are really coming back to bite. And that is ultimately the governance and the cadence. So you can't afford to do all this stuff on the back foot anymore. You really need to be front foot, making sure that you have the accountability sorted out, and that the AI is now moved from an actor to part of the accountability equation across the firm, which is perfect timing because, hey, we've digitalized the infrastructure, we're bringing AI in, and we have to create that accountability. So that embeds RegTech as part of this control fabric across the organization.
I think its use into that whole process just allows people to be more efficient. I saw something in the paper today which talks about the use of AI in the law and how it pitted itself up against, even today, against a whole bunch of, I think, 20 lawyers, and they gave them a whole list of things to look at and to get right. And they had twice as many errors as the AI, which did the whole thing in 26 seconds compared to how long they did it. I don't think this is about replacement. I think this is about augmentation and making people better at their jobs and be able to focus on the right sort of thing, which has huge implications positively in my eyes for this regulatory space. It allows people to be so much better and allow it to be a much more structured piece. To be more structured, obviously, it has to have a very strong technical architecture alongside that as well. I think that's becoming more and more recognised and more considered around that as well. So if we think about a fiduciary boardroom decision with regards to tech architecture, tell me a little bit about how I know that's something which you're covering on the day. Tell me a little bit more about how that works.
Yeah, I think it's back to this theme of the documentation is not enough. You actually have to be able to prove it, and the advantage is that by proving more faster, you actually have better governance. So it helps with this to have the replayable controls that fit with your framework, and that's the trick, which is you need a digital twin. You need to be able to say, this is what I do and how it applies to the rules. Because once you do that, then you're no longer at the whim and mercy of the large language model that doesn't understand you, or the stale old transformation logic you were getting from some old RegTech company. You're able to demonstrate that, no, for me and my business here today for this ticket, I'm able to demonstrate all those appropriate controls were followed, and that the customer was contacted correctly, and then we did the appropriate screening and all these things. So it's getting it down, embedded in the fabric. And that's another key theme, is really that embedding, which has started and is such a fundamental part of our industry. As we all know, we love standards, and there's so many of them to choose from. But ultimately, you can use those standards to map what you do today and help with that digital twin that you can show the regulator.
Yeah, and I think when we look at that sort of, what you're talking about there, and it is when you look at technology as a whole, when you look at AI specifically when it comes into it, there is this industry issue that financial services has about being approximately right, and that's where the trust breaks down with the general adoption of AI. To me, that comes in when you actually twin it with people and you get the best of both worlds alongside that now. But to me, it's the battle for trust and computers' trust that comes onto it, and I guess that's where you're covering that in that conversation as well, right?
Yeah, absolutely, because that trust has a cost. There's a real opportunity cost of not having that trust. And once you've lost it, it takes a while to build it back.
Absolutely.
And so ultimately, think about the environment, think about what you have been spending just to do things the old way. If we start now the re-engineering program to meet regulatory expectations, you could be easily well ahead of your pack. And I think that's the upside this year. There's a material advantage to being at these conversations early because you're
Yeah.
working out, well, what do they mean? Most people are still getting Gen AI out of the pilot phase and into production. So come learn what people are actually doing with it and how that affects the trade life cycle, the regulatory report, the surveillance, the AML. Those are the things where the real business cases are, because not
Yeah.
only from a cost perspective, but the problem of getting them wrong. And that's really the risk. If you miss out on this conversation, somebody else next to you or sits on the spreadsheet near where the regulator is looking, looks a lot better than you. And
Yeah.
ultimately that makes you a target. And so you really want to be able to have these conversations that range through all kinds of different sovereign hands and different flavors of what they're looking for, but fundamentally get back to all these issues of control.
I think it's underestimated that sort of race in AI, where people are looking for their alpha through the utilization of technology and AI specifically, and getting that bit right. And I think coming to events there where you're actually hearing people talking about it in real time. I roll back 2 years where everyone was posturing around AI, but no one was really using it. Everyone was talking about their AI agenda and what they were going to do with it and everything like that, but no one really did. Last year, there was a lot more thrown at their feet in the water. We're coming up to conference season over the next couple of months in particular, and it feels like people are now fully underwater and right in the weeds of it, and that's really positive, I think. And I think if we go beyond that sort of conversation, go beyond data residency and see what sovereignty, you mentioned it before, sovereignty, what sovereignty means for operational resilience. Tell me how you're covering that and your thoughts in that sort of space.
Yeah, our sovereignty panel is really popular this year, and we're bringing on a really expert lawyer to help us work through the different IT law challenges, that then intersect with the operational resilience law challenges that then get you into the different frameworks for controlling AI itself. So we're kind of past that stage 2 years ago where everyone sat around and talked about principles of AI, but we're now getting into the details of the governance frameworks, and saying, okay, well, how do you make this work? And I think sovereignty is a key piece of it because it just makes sense from an infrastructure point of view. Compliance is now infrastructure, so let's work out how to get the rules onto that. So if I can't move this bit of data out of Norway because there's a particular communications act that says Toby has, particular indicia that says I can't share that bit of information, that we stop that at the infrastructure level.
Yeah.
Don't rely on all this infrastructure that we built in to check things with spreadsheets. And ultimately, that's a lot more effective, a lot more efficient, and at least I think, frankly, a happier set of people working in the industry.
I mean, that's a really important part of it, isn't it? It's I think arguably and stereotypically, if you look at the regulatory space, it hasn't necessarily come hand in hand with fun and engagement alongside that. I think there's people who throw themselves into it, but I think exactly when you talked about people enjoying the space and enjoying what they can do and being challenged by it all, it feels like that's a real pivotal stage at the moment. I'm always interested in the people aspect of it, and for want of a better expression on it, there's opportunities right now to make regulatory technology in the regulatory space sexy again, and that's quite an exciting option, isn't it?
Yeah, I think there's been a lot of fear of the unknown. I mean, I've been doing this for 2 decades, and it's always some new acronym that someone wants to run around and be famous.
You've been making it sexy for 2 decades, PJ.
I've been trying to. I stuck the RegTech FS logo out there, and it caught on. It took it 3 years, 2015, for the regulator to catch up to it. But the concept has always been there. It's what's the reality and how does it really help me?
Yeah.
And I think from the senior management point of view, all the way down to the person having to check fails, now they're actually starting to get it, and they can kind of get closer to touching and feeling it and seeing, yeah, there's something here for me.
Yeah, and if we look at the conference itself, you mentioned a few of the themes that are going to go through there, but let's look at the people who come into the RegTech conference. We went through it and walked through the agenda. You were very kind to sort of share your screen with me when we spoke a couple of days ago, and you walked me through what looks like a pretty packed agenda. Tell me some of the highlights. Tell me some of the things that people should be looking out for, who they should be looking to, who they should be excited to listen to.
Yeah, I think a lot of things we talked about here will be much in a structured way on the panel, but the key of these conversations is get the right people, and so we're bringing in the regulators that look at the prudential, the top down views of how all this information fits together, that are trying to get a lot more detailed, taking them up front, getting them through semantics and what their plans are to kind of rewire the way they monitor data. And then immediately pivoting to the people that are doing the transactional data that are also having to rewire that with, MiFID 3 is on our doorstep, and we're in the UK, we're under consultation right now. So we're getting into what is it really going to mean to change the engines on these aircraft while we're in flight, and then wrestle with, well, what does that mean as we pivot to operational resilience and sovereignty, and how can the infrastructure really help us get beyond that, and specifically with AI, what do you have to do to get control of agents? Because that seems to be the real hot question everyone's got. You can use agents for all kinds of things, but can you tell me what they did and how they made their decisions? Because that's what the regulator's asking. And then ultimately, one of the spaces in this industry that we've done a lot of AI already is the financial crime. And what we're looking at is, well, how does the Gen AI aspect change that game, and to what extent can you use it to really know where your unknown risks are?
I think I went to a conference purely on financial crime not so long ago, and I think I found that honestly a stunning sort of wake up call, if I'm brutally honest with it, because whilst you can see AI as the cure to it, you can also see it as the originator. So there's this incredible war that's going on between good and evil, for want of a better expression, and I think that becomes a fascinating conversation to have. You also mentioned it there and talked about controlling agents, controlling AI. I think you dub it 2026 being the control year. That'll be a running theme all the way through the conversations, I'd have thought.
That absolutely. I mean, and it's a control year in the sense we've reset what the controls need to look like. It's not a year where everything's going to be under control, because it's going to feel a bit uncertain for another 3 years. And ultimately, that's part of a global conversation, again, back to sovereignty, because there's so much more divergence than when we first set out with RegTech back in 2009. The Pittsburgh Summit got all the world leaders together, and they said, yep, this is what the regulatory agenda is. That's all gone. I mean, everyone's now got their own little piece, and turf wars are all over the place. So to be a global financial services sector, you need to figure out how do you pull Humpty Dumpty back together again and get that control framework in place.
Yeah, absolutely. So very, very exciting event. It's here in London, EC3, right in the centre of everything. You said a little bit about what we can expect to see. 200 odd people in that room, all good senior people to be networking with, some great conversations to be had. Finish up, PJ, by telling us where people can sign up.
regtechconference.co.uk. Being early on domain names matters. So search RegTech Conference.
It doesn't get better than that.
But yeah, as you say, and I got to say also, thank you to the suppliers and the sponsors that have come on board this year, because it was a fantastic booths and some great stuff going on. You actually see things in action, not just hear it talked about. No slides. This is all about real dialogue. This isn't canned pitches. So encourage everyone to hit that regtechconference.co.uk, or find us on LinkedIn at RegRisk Legal Solutions.
I think that's such a good point to make, that having those sort of different conversations, that different way of dealing with it, having something that's genuinely engaging, I think is so important at the moment, and it looks like a fantastic day. So very, very excited. PJ will be there. We're looking forward to joining you. It's going to be a great day. And for everyone who's been watching, please do sign up. We hope to see you there. PJ, an absolute pleasure talking to you. Very best of luck with the conference. 10 years, 9 events. Can't wait to see what happens with it all. Keep rising the game. Thanks for coming. Thank you all for watching. We'll see you on the next episode of FinTech Focus TV. Thanks a lot.
you.